Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media Warren Frey, and as with every Wednesday, I have with me today
DCN and JOC editor Lindsay Cole.
And the news stops for no one, so what's happening in the East?
Indeed, that is very true, Warren. The news certainly doesn't stop. We've been very busy and we keep humming along, even though everyone thinks, oh, it's the summer months in August. That doesn't really apply to the news business, especially in construction. So we have a couple interesting stories on the go. The first one that I thought I would highlight that Angela wrote up for us pertains to the highly contentious Eglinton Crosstown LRT project, which we have reported on several times this year, and since its inception, when it was even being thought about many years ago. But the latest news that we have to share on it is that Metrolinx will be hopefully unveiling opening dates for a portion of the Eglinton Crosstown later this summer or by the end of summer. The CEO made that announcement during an unrelated press conference, but it was something that obviously we picked up on in the media because this project has seen extensive delays. It started 12 years ago. It's now supposed to be 98% complete. We'll see. But essentially, basically, back in April, we reported on the fact that Mr. Verster said that there was about 260 non-conformances and quality issues that were related to this project. And Crosstown Transit Solutions is the consortium that's building it, and they obviously had to deal with these what Verster says are non-conformances. So as it sits now, he said there's been excellent progress made. And at the end of the day, he hopes to be able to unveil these dates on when it can open, because the public's been waiting, and I think so has the construction industry has been waiting to see when this will indeed, open up to the public. So we have that story for you, which is kind of an interesting tidbit. Another one we have on the go that has been everywhere is the Ontario government's Greenbelt report. I'm sure you've heard all about it, Warren.
Oh, yes, I have. Out here in BC, it's still a thing.
It's definitely still a thing. So what we have is obviously when the news broke, we covered that. But what's interesting here is we have I'm going to say a reactionary story, but it's not necessarily that reactionary from the industry itself. Obviously, a lot of people, stakeholders within the home building industry, decided that they weren't going to comment on this story, which is understandable. It's a highly politicized report and initiative that the government is embarking on when it comes to this. So, but we still decided we had to reach out and do our due diligence because some stakeholders were mentioned. So one of those was a dinner that was held by the Building Industry and Land Development Association. It was a chairs dinner. And this is where potentially some packages were containing information on the Greenbelt sites were exchanged. So Build did release a statement commenting on the Greenbelt report. They to their credit, they just said they were holding an event, and it's where a lot of stakeholders and people can do networking and have discussions. But when it comes to the report, they fully complied with it and gave all the information that it was needed, and they take things from there. So from our perspective, obviously that's an industry comment on the matter, but I think going forward we'll be touching on this story as more unfolds, to see, the Ford government has said they're not going to back away from.
There's that one recommendation they're just not going to look at, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Out of the 15, yeah.
So, there was a protest held over the weekend out in Durham region. This is an issue that's not going to go away anytime soon. So we're going to be following it and seeing what transpires. What the integrity commissioner finds out in their review, and we'll be taking things from there. It's one of those stories that obviously the industry is involved to some extent, but it's very highly political. So we we go from what we see in the comments made in the legislature by the opposition, things like that. So we'll be following that as we go forward. But certainly a newsy item for us.
Oh yeah, and this will go
Um,
on for a while, I'm pretty sure. So,
oh yeah, I agree. Um, on the western side of things, an interesting take on also a very highly politicized issue. Um, the Canadian Renewable Energy Association.
mhm,
Um, they commented in an article recently by Grant Cameron about the moratorium, if you will, on new wind and solar projects in Alberta. So they are basically saying it's a mistake to do
mhm,
that, and that they should reverse course and reopen the market ASAP. Because, as you've seen, as we've reported on extensively, Alberta has kind of been on a leader when it comes to these renewable energy projects. Be it these
mhm,
huge solar fields that you see, or these massive wind projects. So obviously, the Renewables Energy Association is saying, like, why are you halting this?
mhm,
Um, Obviously, the government counters that by saying that they need to do a little bit more due diligence for these projects, and talk to those. And again, it's kind of related to agricultural land, who the communities that might be impacted, etc. So I thought it was a really unique take. We've obviously had the political spectrum from
mhm,
the premier's comments to other politicians when we reported on that, but this is actually an industry voice speaking to the matter. What's also interesting in it is that the IBEW 424 commented in favor of the premier's decision. They are saying that it highlights areas of concern when it comes to safe labor practices. So it kind of opens up a little bit of a different angle there.
mhm.
So definitely a story to check out on once again, a story that I guess references, developing in rural areas and where this is going to go. So the next one we have out west is a project story. I always find these ones kind of interesting. It's Winnipeg's Portage Place Mall is going to be
Oh, right.
totally,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, totally revamped. Um, so we have Peter Caulfield wrote a good project piece on it about what they're planning to change this kind of mixed use shopping mall into a campus of sorts that will
Mhm,
have a healthcare center, affordable housing, grocery store, urban green spaces, other aspects that kind of completely turn this project that's currently, or the mall that's currently existing, I should say, on its face. So it's kind of interesting to see what will end up, taking up shop in this vicinity that's very notable in Winnipeg. So
I mean,
that
I was just in Winnipeg, and when you see there's a lot of older stuff there, and when something new
Mhm.
shows up, it really stands out.
Oh, it would. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely it would. And there's um like the existing structure it's going to be developed in stages. Is obviously not going to be something that comes up overnight, but
Mhm,
the renderings itself show a very modern looking um structure, with a big bridge and everything like that. So I think it is going to be kind of a game changer for that area. So
mhm.
it's definitely worth checking out. Um, you can obviously check out our stories on our DCN and JOC websites, but also if you want all your news in one spot, you can check out our newsletters and subscribe to them. You can just go through them and subscribe via our website, dailycommercial.com/newsletters, and you'll see there's a variety of them. There's our Wednesday DCN newsletter, our Wednesday JOC newsletter, and then we also have a bi-weekly DesignX newsletter and a monthly Canadata newsletter. So definitely wanted to plug those. Shameless self-promotion, I know, but I wanted to highlight them because we do often, the stories that I discuss and Warren and I discuss in this news
Mhm.
update often end up in the newsletter. So be worth
Yep,
checking out if you're so
for sure.
interested. And that's it from
And
me.
And up next, we have Edmonton Construction Association President David Johnson talking about why he's optimistic about the coming year or so in construction, even though there's been a lot of headwinds, like, well, name it, and inflation, interest rates, supply chain issues, all that stuff. He still says, no, good things are going to happen, and you're going to find out why now. And we're here today to discuss the construction industry and why David has optimism as to where it's going. But specifically, he wrote an article in Canadian Business Quarterly titled "There's Optimism and Instability in the Canadian Construction Landscape." Now, let's start with what reasons we haven't been optimistic for the past few years. Everybody can guess what those are, but maybe you should line up in Edmonton. What were the big things that sort of caused this instability in the first place, or you were affected by?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is breaking news. I mean, everyone who's lived in the province of Alberta or Edmonton specifically for the past 4 years has seen firsthand sort of the result of, sort of that perfect storm between, well, obviously there's COVID that pretty much sucked for everybody, but that had a sort of a long-term run-on effect on a lot of the the construction industry's initiatives. Projects wound down, things kind of ground to a halt. And then, of course, you've seen some inflation, so major cost escalation over the past number of years across a variety of sort of supply chains, different supply chains, which has really, raised costs, which, of course, feeds back into inflation. Then you look at the, oddly enough, and usually, in markets where you see sort of, those types of activities happening, you see less people working, and unemployment being a bit higher. I mean, there's a weird inversion where we've got crazy high inflation, we've got cost escalation, and yet we can't fill the jobs that we've got. Like there's still plenty of vacant positions, specifically in the construction industry, notwithstanding the other industries that are also short workers. But you look at all of these things together and you go, wow, like this is tough. So unique situation. We got not enough workers, and of course inflation and poor timing on COVID, and all around is kind of a bit of a mess. So that being said, though, I'm probably the only optimist out there, but I certainly see some really big opportunities for the construction industry. And again, going back, actually, if I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the negatives, we also saw a period of time where procurement and project delivery methods were very, very risky. So you would have some projects that would be available for tender, and just by virtue of the contractual method that was being assigned to them, like it could potentially put some even mid to large scale construction firms out of business should things go wrong. And you look at you'd be asked to place a hold for 90 days on sort of supplies for a particular project, yet the cost of those supplies could go up 200, 300, 400% over that 90-day period, and you're asked to be held firm on that. So really tough to kind of give you some certainty, certainly price certainty. So the issue of risk on some of these project delivery methods was certainly a topic of conversation amongst the construction industry, which led to a lot of instability, people not bidding on projects, and you have project owners that are going, okay, great. I'm going to put this out here, and we're going to transfer a lot of the risk onto the contractor side, but then you get no response. So that sucks, or you get very few responses, and of course there's tons of contingencies built in because the risk premium is going to be built back into the overall cost. So if it's a public project, that really doesn't help the your typical Alberta taxpayer, because you're seeing sort of the costs of public infrastructure projects go up fairly significantly as a result of sort of this misalignment on risk. And not to jump ahead, but we're seeing some changes there, and I can chat about that in a bit if you'd like. But
sure.
With respect to some of the ministerial mandates across the varieties of of ministries. Like there is some optimism to be had here. So, I think as an industry, we're coming together to address these things and and highlight them. Whereas maybe in the past, like I suppose if things don't get really, really bad, no one does anything about them. It's like,
Right.
well,
Right.
it's kind of like, we're not happy, but it's not so terrible that we're going to do anything about it. Like it got to the point where, like, amongst all of these issues and you add them all up, industry had to respond. And, that's, I think the industry has done a fairly cohesive job in responding sort of with one voice to say, here's the things that are broken or need repair. And I'm talking, systemically, and here's some suggestions, as to how we can fix these types of things. And, obviously the people at the other side of the table have been open to that to some extent as well. So again, we're looking forward that, we might be able to address issues that have gone on for, decades, if not longer.
So what are some of the things you guys are addressing, and what of that makes you optimistic?
Yeah. So, I mean, what, and in the article, I identified that there's we look at sort of 4 primary areas of interest. And the first one's sustainable and predictable funding for public infrastructure, capital projects, right? And improvements to the procurement process. So I talked a little bit about that, but, I think, like, with respect to that topic, you look at, I kind of alluded to taxpayers, and, ultimately I'm a taxpayer. Everyone's a taxpayer in Alberta. And, we're best served when sort of the government and the planning department, engineering design departments sort of allow for, whether it's, Infrastructure Alberta or whatever ministry is responsible as an owner for a project, they really need to kind of clearly signal multi-year projects, right? So you want that corresponding financial commitment so that the companies out there, they can prepare to compete for the work, give competitive pricing, high quality, outcomes. But one of the big issues that we've got is that there's a major labor shortage in Alberta, and this
everywhere, really.
This is not unique to Alberta. Actually, in fact, I think I had some interesting stats here. I just looked up. So I looked at the seasonally adjusted employment rate in Alberta, and I went from sort of July 2022 to July 2023, and in the construction industry, we had almost 240,000 employees in construction in 2022. Those are construction jobs, and that's not always entirely inclusive amongst the trades, but specifically to construction. And the same time this year, it's 242,000. So we've increased the number of jobs, but what that doesn't reflect is the number of vacancies that are out there right now. So lots of vacancies, which is not. I suppose it's a good signal for the overall economy and how things are going to sort of rebound. But in short, in Calgary alone, the Calgary Construction Association just posted an article saying that there's about 2,500 to 4,000 vacant positions in the Calgary region. We're looking about the same in Edmonton. So you add those up, you're 8,000 people down. You add in the rest of Alberta, if you go a third, now you're around 12,000 short. And then the Canadian Construction Association in their recent public press release identified that there's about 81,000 total job vacancies in the construction industry in Canada. So fairly large issue. So that kind of leads me to the next topic that we really address, and that's doing everything we can to improve the labor supply. So retention, training, education, increasing diversity, all of those things are super important. But this is where some of that optimism does come in too. And again, obviously, having job vacancies shows some positive growth. If I'm going to take a step back, and I don't mean to be jumping all over the page here, but
that's totally fine.
I was listening to some news this morning, and they were talking about the inflation rate. So inflation rate did bump up. The news this morning was it was at 3.2% over last month, which was actually within sort of the Bank of Canada's sort of acceptable range. So it's gone back up. So what that's going to do is put a little bit more upward pressure on the central bank to sort of increase interest rates again. However, I think, I mean, and again, I've done a lot of research into different economists and what people's different opinions are. I think we're still, even though this, is an unfortunate jump in inflation, 3.2 is certainly less than we've seen in the past, and I think we're kind of starting to hit that apex where, again, we may dip into a recession. Not anything that would be extended, but what that does do is certainly help address the inflation number, and obviously keeps projects on time and on cost. So it's, I don't want to be the guy in the room saying, hey, I'm really optimistic that inflation, will go up as a result of, or will go down as a result of an increase in interest rates. Like that's kind of a not a good news scenario, but there is always a silver lining. So, the silver lining is that, we kind of find a happy equilibrium in the marketplace where, we're not riding the really super volatile waves of up and down, and hey, by the way, it's $2 for a loaf of bread this month, next month it's $8 for a loaf of bread. Like stability is super important, and I think that we're kind of on the pathway towards that, and we're seeing that with a lot of the new projects that are being announced in the province of Alberta. And again, this does, when you start seeing a lot of these projects, you go, all right, well, that puts, again, more upward pressure on the labor supply. So we've launched, we have a career pathways committee that we've launched at the ECA, but we work with a lot of various stakeholder groups to sort of address the labor issue, not just for the Edmonton region. Obviously, we're the Edmonton Construction Association, and that is our primary focus, is just the general region here. But, with a lot of the things that we're doing, it will help the entire province. It'll help the country. So, you look at, again, there's about 21% of the workers in Canada are kind of set to retire within the next 4 to 5 years. That's going to translate to quite a lot of construction workers. So, what can we do? So, first thing we look at is we want to update the immigration policy. So this is really this is federal policy. Like, this is something that the Canadian Construction Association really advocates for. We do lend our voice and support behind this. But we're looking at, we need more people. Simple as that. Alberta and Canada in general is just not creating enough workers to satisfy the demands, especially given some of the announcements with respect to projects, not just in Alberta but Canada-wide. So I think there needs to be a bit of a rework on some of the immigration policy, and that's sort of that points system. So you assign points. Like if you're living in whatever country and you want to come to Canada, you fill out sort of a form, and you get points assigned based on experience and your skills and whatnot. Unfortunately, like, we don't feel that there's enough points assigned to those skilled trades. We need to kind of modernize and update this to say, hey, like, are the point systems, is it really efficient right now given today's climate and given the fact that we're a growing economy, and we need to build, infrastructure, homes, commercial buildings. Like, all of those things have a cost, and those costs are higher when you don't have a full labor supply. So ultimately, you have to pay more for the available labor that's out there. So that's certainly something that can help to attract and make certainly more easy the ability for people from outside of Canada to move to Canada. Secondly, we want to work with the provinces. So this is something we do. We are a registered lobbyist for the province of Alberta. So I mean, which is just really just a reporting mechanism to show that here's the ministries we meet with, here's our policy platforms, and here's sort of the changes we're looking to affect. But we meet with them to make sure that there's some skills matching. So when we get those folks in, that there's skills matching to the appropriate sectors, and that they're funded and supported. talking about sort of updating the temporary foreign worker program. So, we want better access to the construction industry. Obviously, temporary foreign workers are going to go wherever they want to go, but it's nice to kind of put a spotlight on this industry. This industry is, technically we're, the fourth largest industry in Canada. We contribute, 7.5 bill to the GDP. 141 billion to the economy annually, 1.4 million construction employees across Canada. So we're not small. And then of course, back on the provincial side of things, if we look at sort of that labor mobility and accreditation, we want to bring people across. So like if you're a welder or an engineer in Ontario and you want to move to Alberta, or vice versa, there should be a little bit more ease of mobility. And right now, with some of the accreditation bodies, it's like, all right, well, it seems a bit onerous to be able to get certified, even though you're doing the same work in another place in the same country. So on the optimism side, there's the Minister of Infrastructure and the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade. So the provincial mandates have recently come out, and part of that was, they were asked to design a ministry-specific job attraction strategy to raise awareness for both young Albertans and adults changing careers, but also skilled trades and professions in construction, different pathways for education and training. So like that's certainly important. But the other thing they're looking at doing is sort of removing some of those barriers for accreditation across the province. So that will allow folks to flow from one province to the other a little bit more freely. That doesn't help fix the problem, because if you're taking, if there's a net migration of employees from, say, Ontario to Alberta, well, then Ontario is kind of left behind. So, there's sort of greater strategies, at hand that will help address the issue overall. And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet here.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask. How much, because you don't have to deal with the point system or anything, but it sounds like almost you do. I know Alberta, the government has been promoting people moving to. I've seen the ads in Toronto. Like I live in Vancouver. I haven't seen any ads here, surprisingly, but I've definitely seen the ads in the TTC in Toronto saying come to Alberta, and presumably people are. But are they running into these roadblocks you're talking about?
Yeah, and that's part of the issue. So like they've done a great job. No. That's an issue of a bone of contention with obviously other provincial governments.
Of course,
because you're stealing our employees, and I recognize that certainly. But the issue too is that they say great, we're gonna move to Alberta, and for whatever reasons, whether it's affordability issues or tax or job opportunities, they might get here and find out that they need to spend time and/or money to upgrade their certifications. Maybe they're not eligible. Maybe it's not what they thought. Like you kind of have to support it on both sides. You got to say, all right, it's great to you got a very successful marketing campaign, but you get people to say yes, and then they come over and they go, oh, well, I'm going to move back. This has just been way too much work, or things are not what I thought. And so, you see some of that. Fortunately, many are staying, but you do hear those stories as well, which is really unfortunate. So, I think that I don't want to suggest by any stretch that they put the cart before the horse here, but some work needs to be done on the sort of the policy side of things to make sure that you can support those folks who are coming here. And I would say that would be the same for any of the provincial governments that having a similar type of program. But again, that doesn't address the issue. That moves a limited labor supply around from sort of a place of high concentration to low concentration. The longer term fix is, and so again, through our career pathways committee, and other associations have similar type of entities, but we're looking at promoting trades via the schools. So we have to kind of home grow our own future here, because there's only so many folks that are already out there working in the industry. So if you're constantly competing for that sort of scarce resource, you're just going to find yourself paying more, or like it doesn't address the long-term issues. So we work with, we have a program called Tools for Schools. And what we found is that a number of the school boards, I mean, specifically, there's been a bit of a trend, I suppose, to reduce exposure to sort of the junior high school students with respect to the trades. And, you know, and I recognize how budgets work. So,
right.
You know, the provincial government sends some money to the school boards allocate their, you know, their, whether it's capital or operational spending accordingly. And, you know, it's really tough to drop $50,000 into a trades per construction program at a junior high when you've got leaky roof in the classroom. So, like, I recognize the you know, the constraints they're under. Mm-hmm. So we actually just thought we would take matters into our own hands. So we divert a portion of our reserve funding to this initiative, which like I said, it's called Tools for Schools. And we make sure to, this year we were out at 26 different schools, and we provide brand new tools to each of those programs. So we work with the teachers to, you know, find out what they need, what they're looking for. And, you know, as an industry, we come together, and we get sponsors for this as well, but we come together to help address that. So, like, it's a very small thing. It helps the Edmonton region. I certainly encourage other, you know, associations to do a similar thing. But the other thing that, you know, we do is we provide scholarships for post-secondary, so whether it's a polytechnic or construction programs. So we give hundreds of thousands of dollars away per year for that. And, you know, we obviously encourage the provincial government to increase funding to a lot of the polytechnics, such as like your NAIT and SAIT, that trains that next generation. You know, we need to look at this as sort of like a multi-tiered approach. So yeah, so you've got your federal sort of strategies, you have your provincial strategies, and again, being optimistic, the provincial governments and the federal governments have sort of telecasted, you know, they've indicated that they're open to these types of things. We're seeing that in the ministerial mandates. I think, you know, this is a really good consultative period for us to make sure that they can get it right. Mm-hmm. But, you know, again, the other thing I think I see a lot of optimism on is like through our partners. So we work with a lot of other stakeholders. We support Skills Alberta Canada, which is a group that you know, they have they really do support trades for youth, and they do competitions across a variety of different trades, junior achievement, etc. So we work with different groups that also support diversity in the workforce. So I think I read a stat that it's something like 76% of construction workers are male. Well, I mean, if you want to find more construction workers, it should be fairly obvious where you're going to get a lot of them, and that's from the women's side of things. We have a subgroup of the ECA called Women Build, and we look at sort of initiatives to help encourage the growth of you know, women that are considering construction and trades as a career option. You know, we're looking at BIPOC and sort of other new immigrants, you know, you know, indigenous strategies. There's all sorts of stuff that we got to look at to say, hey, here's how we're going to be able to address this in the short, the medium, and the long run. But overall, you know, I think again, there's a bit of an air of optimism. Now it's cautious optimism, but, you know, I think we can get there. And I think that the construction industry might have a bit of a marketing problem. Like, it's a great industry. It's lucrative. It's very rewarding. Yet we don't do a good enough job of you know, putting the spotlight on the industry to kind of attract and retain those employees. So I think once we figure that out, you know, we're on the path to success, amongst other things.
Finally, you've got in the article itself, you talk about all the different associations you're working with. The impression I got is I'm sure there's disagreements between the different associations based on their different needs, but it seems like you've got something of a united front, and maybe you can back me up or tell me I'm wrong on that. But that seemed to be my impression from the article.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's actually really refreshing. Like, I've spent upwards of 20 years in the advocacy world, and you know, it's not very often you get all of the stakeholders at the table kind of violently agreeing on a path forward. Now, obviously, so how it kind of works is, you've got your regional advocates, so the local construction associations, and then you have the provincial advocates. So that would be the Alberta Construction Association or the Road Builders Association, for example. And they're provincial in scope. And of course, you've got the federal one, which is the Canadian Construction Association. So we all agree on the issues at hand. We all agree that something needs to be done, and we all agree in general as to how to get there. The primary differences might be on some of the hows, though. So the approach, like some may be in favor of maybe a more aggressive campaign to kind of, get the government on side, and others are a little bit more like, well, let's take a step back and work with government to to address these issues. And it's the timeline that people may disagree on. No one disagrees on sort of our 4 pillars there. Our 4 pillars. So obviously that's the predictable funding, changes to the risk and procurement projects or process, equitable allocation of risk between the public and private sectors, and obviously the labor supply and the cost inflation side of things. So everyone recognizes those 100%. We all agree on the strategy, and we meet regularly, though. We do. And if there's any disagreement or issues where we again disagree, we can work that out, and we do that. But in terms of a united front, I think it's really important. What happens if you don't have a united front is you give whatever entity you're advocating to, be it the provincial government, the federal government, whatever, some ministry, if you can't all agree, you give them license to do nothing. Because if I'm in the government's seat, I'm going to go, well, these guys in the industry can't even get it together. We don't want to risk upsetting one group at the for the benefit of another. So we're going to do nothing, or we're going to do whatever we want, which is probably not the most efficient way of going about things. So if we can get our messaging together, which we do, what ends up happening is you have more voices and more stakeholder groups all advocating for the same thing. You're going to start seeing change at a faster rate because it becomes a bigger issue. It's not just one sort of small association saying something. It's everybody. It runs across the entire industry, and as a result of that, and I think we've seen some of the fruits of that labor to some extent. Now, certainly tons of work still to be done, but we are seeing increased collaboration and cooperation with government and consultation. Again, is it perfect? It is not. But again, we're not going to create another barrier to have the government or whatever body not react. So.
Okay, great. This has been a rather wide-ranging discussion, David. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. I hope I'm right that that things are on the up and up. And if I'm wrong, well, we'll have another conversation in a few months about what went wrong.
Sure, but sounds good to me. Okay.
Hopefully, the conversation is about Dave. You were right. So
okay,
we'll keep it there.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much.
And that's it for this episode of the Construction Record Podcast. But before we go, I'd like to point you toward a couple recent economic articles by Construct Connect that do a deep dive on the top 10 major upcoming medical and educational construction projects in the U.S. for August 2023, and the top 10 major upcoming industrial and water treatment construction projects in Canada as well. As well, we have an article from Construct Connect chief economist Alex Carrick about July's job creation reports, which he contends will be accepted by the U.S. Federal Reserve and please the Bank of Canada. You can listen to us on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and Spotify, as well as the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.